meeting for June 6th.
Recording in progress.
Start with the pledge of allegiance. I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, good morning. Welcome to our work session for June 6th, 2023. Today is D-Day. Thank you to all who have served for our country in that time. Just a reminder, this meeting is being recorded, and also cell phones are quieted down. All right, first up is GFUMP with fire season update, and Mr. Jeb Coons, is that Mike?
Good morning, everyone. I'm Jeb Coons, the Interagency Fire Staff Officer for Lakeview District BLM and Fremont-Wainema National Forest. We're going to start out with kind of the, unfortunately Brett Smith, our fire planner, who's much more of an expert at our seasonal outlook stuff, couldn't be here today, so he handed it off to me, so I'll do my best to cover in his place. Likely hand it off to one of the other agencies to do their report out, just to give me a break, and then I'll come back with my sort of preparedness report out for the season. So if you guys want to open the package there, apologies, it kind of printed funny on me and I didn't notice it until I got almost here, so it's sort of in a booklet form. So looking ahead at kind of trying to predict what 2023 fire season might look like for here in our neighborhood in South Central Oregon, as well as kind of the Northwest and nationally, touching on a few things here. You know, they often look at the El Nino. Right now it's kind of got a southern oscillation thing going on. They take a close look at the water year precipitation, always looking at that snow water equivalent, of which we got a little more this year than we have in a while, and then how that all plays into the drought, both the long-term and short-term effects of the drought. So those are some of the things that the weather folks and the you know, fire predictor type people look at when they're trying to figure out what might happen for this coming season. So spring of 23, there was 3 years of the La Nina. The last 3 seasons have come to an end, and so now we're kind of in a neutral condition, sort of between La Nina and El Nino. That's kind of favored throughout the spring and the summer of this year. But they're thinking maybe the El Nino might come back into development this fall, and that, you know, really affects where the jet stream goes across the western United States, and sort of how that you know, moisture comes in off the ocean, and how that might affect what our you know, winters might look like, and how hot and dry the summers are, that sort of thing. So if you move into the next page for where we're coming into this season. We got a total precipitation precip for the water year. You know, this looks at last fall into this spring, and you can see those blue areas throughout Nevada, you know, Northern California. That's 150% or more of average. Some of those sites in California are reading, you know, as much as like 300 to 400% of average this year. I'm sure you all heard on the news, you know, 30 feet of snow at Tahoe and Mammoth and things like that. So so a lot of total precipitation throughout the Great Basin, and that moves up through our neck of the woods in South Central Oregon. As you move a little north of us, though, you can see that some of that's only 70 to 80% of normal. So Central Oregon and on up into northern Washington, northern Idaho did not see the amounts of precipitation that we've seen in the Great Basin, Nevada, Northern California moving in through our area. So, you know, we're sitting at average, a little above average overall. You look to that, you know, more zoomed in map there on the right, you can see Lake County sitting at about 108%, Klamath dead on at 100%, you know, Rogue, Umpqua at 95%. And our neighbors at Harney and Oahe counties are a little above the 100% mark. So that's total water year for the season. Brett was nice enough to kind of do a comparison to contrast last April compared to this April, and you can see that massive amount of blue when it comes to the snow water equivalent for April of 23, all the way up through us. You know, 142% I think is where some of those are coming in at. So lots of snow water equivalent for our area, and a huge change from last year where we were well below average, you know, severe or even worse drought conditions, that feeding into that drought condition rating. So, and that leads us into the next kind of the drought effects. So drought conditions improve but remain throughout much of the western United States. Long-term drought, 5+ years in our neighborhood, still having effects on soils and vegetation, and a lot of this drought index is driven by soil moisture. So keep that in mind. It takes a while for all that to catch up, even with a winter like we had. Current drought conditions remain or possibly worsen in northern Washington, and it can take several years to improve those drought impacts. But on that next page, you can see how we've changed from May of 22 to May of 23, and this is just the drought index is updated just the other day. So that giant red extreme drought, exceptional drought blurb that was in almost all of eastern Oregon, covering parts of the Klamath and Lake counties, even in 22, is really shrunk down to just severe drought. And much of our counties now just in a moderate to abnormally dry. So much better than it was, but by no means are we completely out of drought conditions. This could, with these storms we're still seeing, could continue to improve as we move into June to a certain extent, and as all the snow comes out of the mountains and kind of finishes off. But as can be seen by even Crane, just right here in our backyard, there's still some snow hanging in those higher elevations that could run off and improve things. So we're not completely out of the drought, but we're much improved, I guess, is the overall thing to take from that. So stepping out and looking at kind of a broader picture, 3-month outlook, that seasonal temperature outlook on the left kind of shows us as being possible chances for higher than average temperatures as we move into the next 3 months, and they really don't know what the moisture is going to bring. Is pretty much equal chances. We could be above average, we could be below average, but could go either way, or we might just be right on point for how much precip we get as we move into the next 3 months into our fire season. Probably something worth noting though is if you look up towards Washington on that precip, in north of us again, Central Oregon, still they're predicting below average precipitation for kind of the upper part of the Northwest. So I'd say that combined with some of those other factors we've looked at might mean Washington, northern Idaho, the northern part of Oregon could be seeing a more active fire season, or at least a better chance for large fire potential than we have in our own backyard. And that kind of feeds into the next one, those fire potential outlooks. You'll notice this covers several months, so this just got updated the other day. So June of 23, we already have parts of eastern Washington and southern Oregon with chances for significant potential fire growth. And then as you move into July, that increases. That's driven a lot by the annual and perennial grasses that are going to be in the Great Basin, eastern Oregon, and up through central and eastern Washington. And that's where you see that big blurb, that big red blob come into play. That's really following these grasses as they cure. And we have a lot of that on our desert this year. I'm sure Drew from Fish and Wildlife will attest to that. The desert is thick with grass this year. Those will cure out, and that does tend to give us a potential for large fires in the desert when we have a heavy grass crop. But just like they're predicting here, and given our experiences, I would say that July into August is probably when that large fire in the desert will have the most potential, and these outlooks kind of predict that as well. If you look at August, you see that pretty much that same shape for the Northwest for that potential large fire growth. And then as you move into September, that kind of shrinks back up into northern Washington again. I think for us here, that's kind of twofold. One is our days are getting shorter. As we move into September, usually we get some late season monsoonal moisture, which helps bring up RHs and sort of wettens the desert back down again. And so that we still have the potential for fires, but the potential for large, what you might call catastrophic fires, lessens. And then Brett was nice enough again to put together kind of the last 3 years of July, and you can really see how things can change over the course of years, even for a given month. So, that our area in July 21, obviously that was Boot Lake Fire, Cougar Peak, Patton Meadow, big year for us. 22, we still had that potential. We just didn't get as many. We didn't get the starts that created the problems. We had the one fire, Van Meter Fire, over there on Steuple Mountain in Klamath County. But overall, active fire year, but just not a lot of large fire growth. And then This year, you can see we're kind of a bit under the gun again, but without the starts, you never know what's going to happen. So kind of in summary there on the last page, average to above average precip and snow led to significant reduction in drought severity, although it remains at least a minor factor in fire season timing and severity. Precipitation amount and duration may lead to above average herbaceous fuel loading. That's where we're talking about in the desert, having a lot of heavy grasses this year. Plus there's carryover from previous years when we had wet springs and maybe didn't get grazed off or whatever. So definitely some of that heavy loading on those fine fuels in the desert can lead to large flashy large fire growth, rapid fire growth in the desert, especially if wind driven. Above average snowpack may delay the beginning of a forecast average fire season in higher elevation forests. The one thing I will say to that is, we still are, even with those, those fuels being under snow for longer than usual, we still have a lot of fuels in our woods. There's a lot of places that still have heavier than 100 years ago fuel loading. So I'd say the potential for large or difficult to control fires exists into August probably, maybe not so much July this year. And southwest monsoon season expected to be near average timing duration, and it's always dependent on ignitions. And we've got lightning yesterday. We got a few fires out of that Fort Rock over on the Zama Zone north of Chiloquin. A couple of lightning fires there as well. So usually depending on lightning for ignitions here, but you never know when humans might help that out. So any questions, I'll do my best to answer, at least in regards to the 23 season outlook for kind of our area and the Northwest. All right. I'll hand it over to these other guys for their updates and then come back to you with the Forest Service deal. So I'll have to talk to you about that.
Thanks for leading. Good morning. My name is Drew Taylor. I'm Navajo for Sheldon Hart Refuge Complex, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. So just kind of touch on what Jeb spoke about as far as fuel loading out in the desert. Definitely got a lot of grass out there on both the BLM ground and the refuges out there. I will add that someone told me this is the biggest snow year we've had on Sheldon since 1983 this year. So even Sheldon got a bunch of snow. We actually have quite a bit of some road damage out on both refuges this year just from the amount of water, which is, water is good, but then that can also give us some other problems. But other than that, there's almost all the water holes, lakes out there got water in them, overflowing the edges. So it's a good water year out in the desert. With that being said, lots of grass and brush growth. So even if we get normal average temperatures for the rest of June and July, those are gonna cure out probably normal time. So like Jeff was saying, probably that late July, August, probably gonna have potential for some larger fires out in that desert just with the grass loading, because that's the driver out there, as most of you probably know. With that being said, I'll just jump into what we're going to have staffed this year. Last year we had one of our 2 engine captains resign, and instead of just refilling behind him, we actually went with a different model for our staffing and grabbed an opportunity with our regional office support to switch one of our modules to a regional fuels mod. So, which originally has 6 permanent positions on it. We were able to fill 3 of those. The other 3 we could not, which still leads into some recruitment retention issues, which Jeff will probably head on later, and probably Dustin. All of us are still kind of feeling, especially in some of these, well, it's not just here, it's everywhere. It's kind of hard to recruit firefighters right now, but we are sitting good with what we did. We're able to recruit. We have enough qualified folks to staff both engines, and then a third one if needed to help out in a partnership here. Some of the other units are not sitting as well as we are, but we're a big partnership family here, so we help each other out. So that's already been voiced to those other FMOs that you guys need an engine boss or need to move some temps over, we can staff a 3rd truck. So we're actually sitting good for staffing, probably the best we have been since I've been at Sheldon Hart, honestly. So we also brought back our own prescribed fuel specialist last summer and hired Sam Takini into that position. So he's been doing great work for us. He brings us a good operational firefighter as well. But he's been really trying to bump up our fuel stuff out on the refuges, which primarily is a bunch of juniper cutting, but we are getting back into some meadow burning on both refuges. Kind of fell away from that for 10+ years, but we're trying to get fire back into those meadows. Some of them definitely needed, had reduced production in there for sage grouse and other species. So this last year, I think we burned 900 acres of juniper piles on Sheldon, and a total of about 600 acres of meadows on Hart and Sheldon. Most of the Sheldon stuff was out in the Virgin Valley area there around the headquarters. And that's going to be our priority area for meadows for a while on the Sheldon area. But then we're also looking at some bigger meadows that haven't had fire in them on Hart, like Big Flat, which is down on the south end. If we can get to it this fall to prep it. We haven't even gotten down there yet to check out the road damage. I know there was fairly extensive road damage on parts of Hart, and some of the stuff you can't even access still because of all the water we had and then the runoff. So, but that, like I said, we're gonna have at least 2 engines staffed. We got a couple extra overheads and capabilities to staff 3 trucks if need be this year here. So, unless there's any questions, that's pretty much in the report for Sheldon Hart.
All right, now,
That's a really good summary.
Okay, thanks.
glad to hear the staffing's better.
Yeah, we kind of stole from someone else. Yeah, well, people moved over, moving people around.
Good morning.
Right.
For the record, Dustin Gustavson, Protection Unit Forester, ODF. So yeah, if I can have a chance to prognosticate for a moment, I would, with this winter and all the snow that we got, it's easy for everybody to sit back and think that fire season may not be very busy. However, everything I see is we are lined up very closely with what 2017 looked like in this area. And I don't know if you remember 2017, but that was the last busy lightning year we had in this country, and there were several fires. They weren't, the bootleg size of fires or the Cougar Peaks, but they were definitely a handful of 500 acre to a couple thousand acre fires across the Skafump area. So I'd say that's probably a real possibility as we go through the fire season. And I mean, even this spring, you look at the amount of lightning that we've got, seems kind of unusual from where we've been the last few years. So who knows how that'll continue to play out. So the Department of Forestry, we change. There's a lot of change down here for ODF. Started back in May, I think May 1st, our District Forester, Dennis Lee, took a position with the Oregon State Fire Marshal's office. And so, and then also this winter we had our unit forester in the state forest program, John Pellisier, retired. And so that has created a lot of change. Teresa Williams has been hired as our district forester. So now we'll be hiring an assistant district forester. Matt Flock was hired in the state forest program. He worked there in Klamath, and so that's created trickle down there. Our agency also added another manager in the forest resources program in Klamath. That position will be hired soon. We've added a small forest owner forester in Klamath. And so that's created some trickle down also in Klamath Falls. And then we will be hiring another forester in the district focused on restoration and recovery after all these fires that we've had. There's a lot of issues with seed sources, seed banks, getting seedlings grown for landowners, and some other work out there that are adding a forester specific to focused on fires and fire recovery. As you all know, we've had a lot of acres burned over the last few years, and we have quite a workload there to help some landowners. The good news is, I would point out that a lot of the areas in the bootleg fire actually have pretty decent natural regeneration happening. The timing of the year when it happened, that seed dropped after the fire. We've had some decent moisture in the winters that have come after that. it's allowed for some natural regeneration. Unfortunately, with the, like Cougar Peak happening late in the fall, that seed was already on the ground, and we don't anticipate seeing near the natural regeneration that we're seeing on the bootleg fire. Locally, our staffing is probably better than it has been the last couple of years, as far as our firefighters go. Unfortunately, the amount of qualified and experienced staffing is reduced than where we'd like it to be. So we are putting more people on fewer engines than where we typically are. Typically, we run 7 engines with 2 people each. We'll be running 4 engines with 3 people each. We'll have our dozer and tender combination here in Lakeview. Klamath Falls is fully staffed. We'll have I think they have 11 engines and 2 dozer tender combinations over there. And what else? We'll have our Type 3 helicopter in Klamath Falls, and then this year we've had a Type 2 helicopter in Klamath Falls, part of the statewide severity program. Last year was the last year of the contract on that ship, so the agency has upgraded to a Type 1 in Klamath Falls. And so, unfortunately, I can't speak much of that yet. It's made it through the protest period, that's all good. It's just waiting for a contract to be signed before we can say exactly who that will be.
Still got the seat program in John Day?
Yeah, so actually, I think the Forest Service was doing away with their operating the seat base in John Day, and they were transferring that equipment to ODF, and ODF is taking over the seat base in John Day. And so, yes, statewide we'll have seats in LeGrand, John Day, Prineville, and a couple fire bosses up in the Downs. And then numerous helicopters around, so. Any other questions?
You don't want to talk about rates, do you?
The only thing I would say, Senate Bill 762 that happened a couple of years ago, the legislature fully funded the increases of personnel and within the agency. The governor's budget did not have that fully funded. Well, the positions were fully funded, but had that split between landowners and the general fund. And so there was a significant increase of, I don't know the specifics, in some cases 30 to 30% maybe increases in rates. So the landowners are going to be significantly impacted. If, there's some legislation in the legislature that is yet to be voted on that would provide that general fund portion to cover the landowner portion. However, we know what's happening in the legislature right now, and so it's hard saying how that will progress through. But our landowners around here could see a significant increase of, I want to say about 60 cents to the acre on timber rates. Now also, I would say that I believe the Board of Forestry meets in Sisters tomorrow and, what is tomorrow, Wednesday and Thursday? And they will, all the budgets will be going to them on this meeting, and they will be either approving of all the budgets or not. Our local landowners for the Klamath Forest Protective Association did not approve the budget, and other associations did not either, not as a reflection of the work of ODF, but a reflection of the unsustainable cost of protection of east side not unproductive land. So anyways, as the Board of Commissioners, I would suggest that maybe if you have a moment, maybe worth providing some input into the Board of Forestry. I know they'll be taking some testimony on the budgets coming up, I think tomorrow.
Well, that sounds pretty serious.
Yeah, it's a tough spot to be in.
I don't recall the Klamath Lake Board ever not approving the budget?
I recall one other time that they didn't, and I can't remember what year. I think it was around that '09, '08, when we were in that Great Recession time period maybe. But it's, yeah, very rare that budgets aren't approved.
All right.
No questions at this time.
So, all right, thank you.
I had one more handout to give you guys. It's just the contact card for all the OSF that cover Lake County.
Kind of glossy. It's not as
I didn't
glossy
make that. I had to steal that from the mitigation group. So my name is Leland Hunter. I'm the Regional Mobilization Coordinator for the Oregon State Fire Marshal's Office, and I operate out of Klamath Lake County. So I put together this little presentation, and we'll go through real fast. First page, all it shows is the 20-year mobilization data, shows how we're ramping up in our mobilizations, and that's basically all that chart shows. It's a lot of information there, but that's what it's showing, is that we have conflict more, and there's several reasons for that, right? The weather, also, we now don't have to meet the matrix where there's so many structures going to be threatened to start bringing in resources and conflict of incidents.
We don't have to.
We don't have to do that no more. Remember, it used to be where there was a matrix of how many homes would be threatened, and you had to project it out
At a certain
anymore.
distance.
Anymore, we've got rid of that.
So what is it?
So it's if we feel there's gonna be a threat, and it's gonna be long-term, we can start bringing those resources in. And that'd be between me and the county chief, would make that choice, so. Then the next page goes into off-mass Oregon Fire Mutual Aid, system, and this is kinda how we operate. You know, Oregon's, OSFM is not like CAL FIRE, we don't have the resources, so our whole thing's based on mutual aid between counties or mutual aid between departments. Lake County's got 2 mutual aids out, one with Hardy and one with Klamath County. Deschutes County, right now, we're figuring out how that's gonna work. And if that does, we'll get another agreement with Deschutes County, but Deschutes County has no agreements with anybody right now. Then it just talks about how we're going to extend it and everything, and I'll go into that some more further on. So the next page goes into the program focuses, and this is the 3 legs of the State Fire Marshal's Office. As the Deputy State Fire Marshal, that's your code enforcement group. The Regional Mobilization Coordinators, that's the Emergency Services Group, and that's we're dealing with public and assisting with fire departments and going into what that could be if we have to conflict stuff, or we need to bring immediate response, or pre-po resources, or start mutual aid. That's where that phase is. And the other part is the risk reduction specialist. And we do have someone in now, it's Teresa Vaughn. We was kind of lacking one for Klamath Lake County. Teresa Vaughn's in, she's new, but she's really proactive. So that's the person you want to reach out for mitigation stuff, because there's a lot of grants and stuff available, not only to fire departments, but to other entities within the county. Okay. This is where it goes into what my function is, and it goes into conflagration acts. What that is, if a conflagration is enacted, we get the permission from the governor, and it's very quick permission. And then once a conflag is started, we start bringing in our own team to assist with other local teams. So that's basically conflag very, very quickly in a nutshell. Pre-po is one of those things where it's decided, it could be a request from a fire chief, or it could just come from the state fire marshal and say, we got weather coming in, we're gonna pre-po task force in Klamath County. Usually, if it comes south, we put it in Klamath County just because it can move out from there. And they're here for 72 hours, unless we move them somewhere else. They can become part of a conflag, but they're usually here for 72 hours. The one thing that we're looking at right now for pre-poing that's out in the future is the Eclipse event that's coming in October 15th. So that's gonna be a pretty big deal in Klamath County. Not sure what it's gonna happen in Lake County yet, but we'll kind of keep our ear open to see what that's gonna happen there. Immediate response is those resources we bring down outside of mutual aid to help with fires. And we brought them down on the Van Meter last year. They're here for 72 hours, then we have to release them. If it goes to a conflag, we have to bring in other resources, but that's just how that's made. And that allows departments that don't have the capacity to do a 14-day assignment, they can say, we want to be part of immediate response. They can come do their 72 hours knowing after that 72 hours they'll be headed back home. And it's very big, especially to our local firefighter resources, because they can come in and even take over stations or just let them guys take a rest so our local resources can get back up and rolling. And then the mutual aid is that 24-hour service, and that's where Lake County last year went over and helped out in Van Meter, which was huge, and that was very greatly appreciated by those guys.
Good experience too.
Very good experience. Then this is kind of our part of the emergency management part is we're pre-positioning. We'll look at forecasted weather. If it's going to be them hot temps, we'll bring people in. We did last year. We brought them in for Klamath County for a day, and then they got sitting somewhere else. Resource drawdown. That's again if we have something going on. You know, the grain mill up there last year outside of Pendleton. We pre-ploed stuff up there. Unknown events, that could be that eclipse. The eclipse in Klamath is supposed to bring in 30 to 100,000 people. So we'll be looking at doing something there. And increased risk just because of weather or whatever is going to come in that we feel there's going to be an increased risk. On the immediate response side, this is for helping out. We can get, we don't have our own aerial resources, but if it's requested from the chief, I can get approval and OSFM will pay for those aerial resources on underprotected or non-protected lands, or lands that are outside of what the feds normally or the state would normally use that aircraft for. But when we enact that, it's a very quick process to get the approval. It just has to go through, now it'll go through Dennis Lee. He makes that happen at whatever level. And most of the time locally, we can directly call ODF and get that. But now we have permission to use the feds if we can get those. But them are funded now, and where in the past they haven't been. Surge capacity during IA. You know, people think most of the time that them resources come in from the State Fire Marshal's office, that's for structure stuff only. We bring them down, and we will use them for IA on wildland fires too. It's a matter of keeping the people of Oregon safe and limiting the amount of property burned. It's kind of coincides with ODF's mission too. So that's so we can use them however we need them. The idea is to prevent conflags and structure loss. And then we'll gather SA for incoming resources if that coming, because usually that stuff will start there. Next is just how the RMC map is broke down, shows who has what counties. There is going to be 2 new RMCs added, one over in Eastern Oregon and one up around Portland, just because there's so many different counties up around Portland. Then this is just a quick breakdown of last year, what happened within Klamath Lake County. Pre-positioning, we had Task Force 1 down in Lake County, and then they went to the Miller Fire, and Task Force 14 from Benton County, and they helped with a couple IAs but from left. And then during Van Meter, we had Jackson, Josephine counties down as immediate response, Deschutes down, and Lake County was over as mutual aid. And the final page is we have a very, very good grant program, and it just shows the numbers of what Lake County received in grants this year from OSFM. I really truly think we can do better, a lot better. It's just a matter of getting all the fire departments and all the other entities that are interested in it aware of these grants. So on that card, there's a scan code, you guys can scan that, and it'll show you the grants that we offer. Some of them grants are pretty substantial, so, but it's a good, that's where most of our funding goes, is in the grants.
Wow. Pretty good boost for some of our
It is.
smaller fire departments.
It is, and there's one that's the upstaffing grant. Any fire department that asks for that gets that. It's $35,000 for staffing. So,
Is 35,000 the max?
it is. There's other ones that you can get to help with that, mitigation stuff. Some of the fire departments, have received millions, and now they're staffing longer term and hiring people. The problem is, even in the structure world, you can't find people to apply for jobs. And you're talking people that are 80,000 a year, work eight days a month, and they still don't wanna work there.
It's like Paisley did well.
Paisley did well.
And on Thomas Creek West Side.
Yeah, Thomas Cook West Side got a Tech 3 engine. Paisley got a capacity grant that's a 3-year grant. So there's a lot of it out there, and hopefully we'll see how this next session goes, if everybody goes back to, and we'll see if the money goes and what we can do. But the grant program is simple grants. It's not to make it hard where people can't apply.
So you got CWPP on here,
Mm-hmm.
and worked with Dustin a little bit on this too. We've got to step up here, don't we, and find a grant writer, or find a writer for our CWPP. Yeah.
Because the CWPP.
Do we have a
will allow
deadline?
other stuff. What's that?
Do we have a deadline on the CWPP?
I think it's July 2024.
Okay. So, that's important. We'll have to really get after that this fall. Okay.
What is that acronym?
Community Wildfire Protection Plan. Ours is, 12 years old now?
Approaching it.
And so, we had trouble getting any funding because we were 10 or more years old in the past from OSFM or whoever, because we had a outdated CWPP, which really it isn't bad, but.
Yeah, and I guess to clarify, the CWPP kind of talks about the demographics of the county and the fuels, weather, topography, communities, so on. As you all know, not a lot of that changes very rapidly in Lake County. We have very solid WUI maps, wildland urban interface maps that identify that across the county. What we are really lacking is a solid action plan of specific projects that need to be occurring around each community. And that's going to be kind of the main focus of this update, is an action plan.
The CWPP will allow you to apply for more stuff.
And the priority landscape funding that I'll mention later is tied to WUI, which is identified in CWPPs. So Lake County is sitting a little better off. When I speak to the Klamath County Commissioners next week, we're missing out on, we put in for like $22 million of priority landscape money for Klamath County, and they only awarded $7 million of it based on the definition of WUI from the CWPP. We didn't have enough WUI. Yeah, we didn't have enough WUI to justify the $22 million request identified in the CWPP. So Klamath County needs to update their WUI boundaries so that we can do more federally funded work, funneling that money to those projects around those communities. So Lake County is sitting a little better off, I'm told, as far as that goes.
Any other questions?
Thanks, Lee.
It's been good. Thank you.
Thank goodness for clouds. I left my printed paper sitting on the printer, and thankfully it's here on my iPad, so I'm not totally winging it. Okay, so for BLM and Forest Service staffing this year, I'll start with that. For the Forest Service, we're looking to have 12 of our 17 engines staffed this year. Almost all of those are 5-day staffing. We have a couple of engines, I think out of Chiloquin, that might achieve 7-day staffing, where they actually have one engine staffed all 7 days of the week. We extend staffing often to 6 or even 7 days, depending on activity. But with 7-day staffing, people can have days off and you don't park the engine for 2 days. 13 out of 15 of our overhead positions are filled, which is great news. I think last year we were at 9 or 11, if I remember right. So that really is a direct reflection of why some engines are getting parked this year. Some folks worked on qualifications and promoted up, and we were unable to fill qualified engine captains behind them. Also, as Drew kind of alluded to, we did lose several of our engine qualified people, specifically on the east side here, Lakeview and Winter Rim Zone, that are still in our system in the partnership, but we're unable to backfill, and so with qualified people to run those fire engines. So the breakdown of that is 3 of the 6 engines for the southeast zone, which includes Bly and Lakeview Ranger districts, will be staffed. All 3 of those are in Bly. The 3 engines in Lakeview are without leadership. They'll work to kind of ad hoc some engine captains and qualified folks as they can. And Drew is willing to help out. We have the equipment. We just need the qualified personnel to be able to run them. And so duty officers will be working to staff as much of that as they can. A big success for the southeast zone. So we previously ran 2 10-person. We were trying to make them wildland fire modules, 10-person crews that kind of went out, monitored fires, could live in the backwoods. They came with a bunch of qualifications for monitoring fires and taking observations and looking at different fire effects and things like that. With regional support, we moved to a new model of a single 25-person Type 2 IA crew. And we were skeptical about maybe filling half of that this year. And instead, we ended up with 19 of the 25 personnel filled on that crew. It is based out of Bly. And with the qualifications of those 19 people, we actually meet the full Type 2 IA crew status, which kind of surprised all of us. So a real kind of a diamond in the rough that is some of our staffing woes within this area. Very surprised, but glad we were able to pull that off.
Who's the crew lead?
Zach? No.
Adam.
Thank you. Yes, Adam. Sorry, a lot of people out there, and I haven't met all of them yet. I do know Adam. I should have known that off the top of my head. So moving over up to the Winter Rim Zone, which is Paisley and Silver Lake, suffering there a little bit, but we were able to offer a $25,000 signing bonus for GS7s and GS8s, that's assistant engine captains and engine captains. We had 2 people apply for those $25,000 bonuses, one of which was a quality candidate, and we were able to fill one of those positions. But a little surprising that even with the $25,000 signing bonus, 2 applicants. So difficult to fill locations. There was several other for us that were able to get in on that as well. And I think they had mixed results as well. I think if I remember right, the Wallowa Whitman was one of them. They had a difficult to fill location in Ukiah. I don't think they hired anybody for theirs. And then the third forest, I think, got 1 for 3 positions or something like that. So.
And the requirement's 2-year service?
I don't know if I want to really talk about exact requirement on the record, because the 2-year requirement means you stay with the agency, not necessarily at the duty location. So I guess that is on the record. But you can't leave the Forest Service, but you could potentially take that and then go back to somewhere else within the Forest Service. And to my knowledge, the people that have ducked out of that have yet to had to pay a financial consequence of reimbursing that $25,000. I did hear a rumor of someone getting prorated and having to reimburse money on the BLM side, but the Forest Service side, it sounds like they're not pursuing people if they take the signing bonus and then leave before the 2 years is up. So 2 of 4 engines fully staffed, with ideas to bring in overhead and possibly staff 3 when able and needed. But we did have some success there. We did hire a new fuels AFMO for the winter rim zone, which is great. So trying to rebuild that program there, to get that up and running and do more fuels projects along winter rim for Paisley and Silver Lake. So we're glad to have that extra capacity. That person can serve as a duty officer as well. So that was a bonus for winter rim. So Mazama Zone, which is Chiloquin and Chemult, they're sitting really well. They actually filled an AFMO in Chemult, which that's been an on again, off again thing. I think this is someone who's going to stick for a few years. He's got interests in the area, so that's a bonus plus to our overhead and why we've stepped up our overhead staffing a little. They're going to be able to staff all 6 of their engines and the dozer tender combo with 2 qualified dozer. They call them DZIA, which means they're an IA dozer operator. They can operate that dozer at night without a swamper, that kind of thing. And they'll have a third person that helps shuttle stuff around, acts as a swamper, things like that. So Mazama Zone sitting well. I think they lost a captain late to maybe Central Oregon, but then they were able to, they had enough capacity with assistance, they can detail somebody up and keep those engines staffed. And then Klamath Ranger District continues to be staffed well, 2 engines. The Wainema Hotshot crew is running 24 of their 25 possible positions. I guess maybe as a side note, there was sort of a move last spring to move all IHCs and hand crews in general from a 20-person staffing model to a 25. And so that is working out well for us, gives folks capacity to maybe take days off, work on career advancement by taking some single resource assignments to get away from the crew for a few days and not lose the staffing capability of the crew overall. So that's kind of our Forest Service staffing overall for engines. And overhead personnel, the BLM is sitting okay. We got 9 of 11 engines staffed, 4 out of 4 overhead positions filled. There was a little movement in how our overhead is staffed out now. We now have a fire operations technician based out of Klamath Falls. All 3 of those positions used to be based out of Lakeview. They added one to Klamath Falls, and then through attrition, one of the Lakeview ones that used to oversee the Gerber Guard Station, Sunset is what we call it. And so the Klamath Falls Fire Operations Tech now oversees the Gerber Guard Station, which kind of makes sense. It's all part of the Klamath Falls Field Office. And you know, as a result of kind of a split with the WOOP, Western Oregon Operating Plan, a couple years ago, we built up more of a suppression force in Klamath Falls. So there's engines overhead and a IHC based out of Klamath now. We did get a fill on that fire operations tech. He starts, I think, in a week or 2, which is great. And then we still have the fire operations techs based out of Lakeview and then one that covers Fort Rock. At Fort Rock, we'll have 2 of our 3 engines staffed. Lakeview will have, I believe, 2 of 3 engines staffed. And then Klamath Falls, I think, has 3 of 4 engines staffed. Hopefully that math equals 9. And then the hotshot crew is up and available, and both the Forest Service Wainema hotshots and Lakeview IHC were engaged on the Dillon Creek fire, and I'll talk about that a little bit at the end. So they're already out in doing prescribed fire work and responding to wildfires as well. Federal aviation, thankfully we've got our unit aviation officer filled. We added, nationally they added a second air attack position to our air attack platforms. So it's kind of a supervisory air attack and then an air attack qualified below that. We have both those positions filled. We're one of the few in the Northwest that were able to get 2 qualified people into those jobs. And then we have the luxury of Danny Williams, who served in that role for a long time, who retired, still stays local in Klamath Falls. And he is an AD employee, kind of an on-call employee, and fills in to kind of fill the gaps for things, fill in at other bases and that kind of thing. So we're really blessed to have that much qualified folks just right in our backyard. Plus, somebody sitting behind me might have that qualification as well. The Forest Service, the air tanker base, fully staffed, and we added, we upgraded the assistant base manager. They got a little bit of a pay raise, and then we added, I think, another ramp manager or something like that. So there was an added position there. Just helps fill out that group. The BLM single engine air tanker base is online and ready to go already this year. Actually, both tanker bases are up and ready to serve retardant. We went to full service contracts there, so Perimeter showed up last week, got all their gear set up, and we're ready to fill airplanes with mud this week now. The first seat is set to come on June 12th here in Lakeview. Oftentimes we'll start out the year with 2 if it's slow somewhere else, so we may end up seeing a second seat based here right off the bat. And then our BLM funded but interagency crewed Type 2 helicopter staffed here in Lakeview, 17 personnel this year, mix of Forest Service and BLM from the temps clear up to the leadership positions. They've been out already, assisted on a converted prescribed fire to a wildfire over on the Willamette. They're actually coming back today. They're gonna make kind of a pit stop in Fort Rock on their way home in case we get some fires from the lightning we've had the last couple days before they come back to Lakeview. So looking good on the helicopter staffing overall. Moving to our dispatch center, center manager still filled, Susie Suba doing a great job there. We have 2 of our 3 assistant center managers filled, 1 ODF, 1 Forest Service. Still trying like crazy to fill that second Forest Service funded assistant center manager, but lack of qualified applicants. And that's true of all the centers. We have 2 of our 4 lead dispatchers filled, which is a step up from last year, I guess a maintain from last year. But we have 4 of our 5 IA dispatchers filled, which is a step up from last year. I think we had 0 of those as we began last season. And we're using a lot of 30-day emergency hires to fill the gaps there. And we filled 4 temporary positions this year, which actually overhired by 2 vacancies elsewhere on engine modules and other places. Kind of allowed us to overhire at dispatch and try to build our own, bring people up and start filling in these gaps. So it's probably a 5 to 8 year process, but overhiring at the bottom wherever we can to try and feed into the system later. Our center, I will say, is better staffed than most. We have good leadership there, and we have folks that are doing pretty well. We do have a critical shortage in our aircraft dispatchers. Courtney Wilson, who is a longtime employee for us, took a position at a center up Okanagan, Wenatchee with Washington DNR, and she was kind of our primary aircraft dispatcher there. We still have 2 other qualifieds, but that's not their day-to-day role. And so we've got plans in place to bring in people throughout the season to help boost that aircraft dispatch need. And so we think we'll get by, but we've got to figure out a more sustainable system for the aircraft dispatching. And that's a nationwide shortage, not just a problem for here in Lakeview and in Scapone. So I guess kind of to sum up that portion of it, overall, we're still experiencing some staffing shortage and hiring difficulties, especially in our rural and remote duty locations. Again, we filled about 50% of our temporary firefighter positions this year overall. BLM did a little better. I think they're somewhere around 20 to 22 of their 27 temporary firefighter positions. I really think the timing when we fly positions for people to apply is a problem. And it's something we can't address locally. We're flying these jobs in August and September for people who will start in maybe May or June, 9 months later. And so when you're somewhere between a senior in high school and a senior in college, you're not always looking that far ahead for a summer job that might lead to a career in firefighting down the line. And there's just a lot of red tape there we're trying to figure out how to navigate to do a better job of recruiting and filling locally. I will say, while we are a little short on our local our temp fire hiring altogether, we did get more local names on our rosters and on our modules this year than we have in a little bit. So maybe we're seeing a little bit of success with some of the recruiting and showing up to job fairs and that kind of thing. I know Dustin was able to make some late hires. ODF has the ability to kind of almost hire people on the spot. That's just not something we can do with the federal agencies, and it's hurting us. And we continue to voice that up through all the channels clear to the Washington office. I think all of us do. So moving on a little bit to the detection side of things, our lookouts are staffed this year. I think we've got, the only one we kind of did part-time was Skidoo, and that's mostly because it sits right in the middle of the bootleg scar. It does see some ground that isn't burned up, and so they'll staff that when it makes sense, but I think they didn't hire somebody for the entire season. But I believe all the rest of our lookouts are staffed with personnel in the booth right now. And our detection center in Lipsey got up and running last year, and I don't have the stats in front of me, but they were, it was a bonus added. I think there was, I don't know, something like 17 detections overall with the detection center, and like half of those were the initial detection was from the cameras. So we're seeing, a benefit from having that detection center. I think as that portion of our detection grows in the future, we may need to rethink where we have that located. We might outgrow our space in the next 5 years, but we'll see where that goes. And that's in conjunction, that's sort of wildfire alert and the ODF cameras working in concert to see everything from Beatty's Butte to Fish Creek Rim to, the Cascade Crest. We've got cameras that can see all over the place. On the east side, we're working to add a camera to Green Mountain Lookout, which would give us, we'll continue to put a human in the top of that lookout tower, but that camera would give us some of that, outside of fire season look for some of those early season lightning storms or human starts before we get that person brought on. There's talks about putting a camera on top of the ski hill, which I think would benefit both ski season and fire season. And their Fish and Wildlife is still talking about putting one on Warner Peak eventually.
Yellow Peak right now.
Oh, Yellow.
Shannon's actually having a meeting with
Okay.
Winnemucca in NorCal.
Which would look north into all that 8L country and be a nice complement to Beatty's Butte, Fish Creek Rim. And there is a plan that puts camera systems linked all throughout eastern Oregon. Green Mountain's a part of that plan, Wagon Tire would be a part of that plan. To where those all, and I think they were still looking for, I thought Warner Peak was kind of
It
a
is,
part of
but
what
they-
makes that all come together.
They
but-
gotta bring us a different plan. for
Gotcha.
footprint.
Good enough. So that's kind of where we're at on the detection. Barry asked me to kind of touch on priority landscape, and I'll do that. So right now, the priority landscape funding, that boundary ended up being a lot larger than a lot of us thought when we thought of the Klamath Basin and a priority landscape. It really felt like it was going to be kind of Chemult, Chiloquin, and the east side of the Cascades over there. And in truth, that boundary impacts, I think, every district on the forest, clear up to Winter Rim, all the way down into the Strawberry area for Bly and Lakeview. And so there has been a strategic planning group put together to help prioritize forestry projects, where they're gonna go cut, thin, that kind of thing, to best locate areas for prescribed fire implementation, with a desire to increase pace and scale and churn out more prescribed fire acres. It's, the Fremont Wainema continues to be a leader in board feet in the region and in acres for thinning. We need to figure out how to get more of that under prescribed fire follow-up in larger scales. And so that's part of what that strategic planning group is doing. We do have some of that already going on, more so on the Klamath side. And in the Zama Zone, there's some large project areas with possibility to do larger scale prescribed fire follow-up, where they're doing big thinning projects already. But we're going to look at that. I think the strategic group is going to look at that more holistically with an eye towards meeting the objectives of the priority landscape, which is protecting communities and creating a more fire resilient environment. So that's kind of what's going on, what I know about on the priority landscape. The upside to this right now, what is being implemented, I might have said this, I might have skipped this bullet, but we're primarily contracting for pre-commercial thin along our pod boundaries. And so the hope is that we get these pod boundaries that encompass the forest. We've worked across the landscape, even with Green Diamond, to have pod boundaries not stop at a property line, but instead follow what makes sense for what that landscape looks like and what fire might do in it, in the hopes of creating blocks that make it easier for us to manage fires, both whether that's a full suppression or a modified suppression fire, which is what we did with the Dillon Creek fire, the last couple weeks. So that's a nice little segue into the Dillon Creek fire. I'll kind of touch on that. So we've been, for years, even when folks on this panel were a part of the forest, we're looking for possibilities of restoring fire to landscape through natural starts. And Dillon Creek fire presented us a really great opportunity to do that. We had time, given the conditions we had in the environment and the pace at which that fire was growing, to set up some planning and get a good group in place. Drew is a big part of that. putting a Type 3 team together, ordering and resources. We had the luxury of a lot of stuff coming online and not already chasing fires elsewhere. I think we were able to get somewhere around 4 hotshot crews, a number of engines, both contract and federal, state helped out. I know we had state resources up there on that fire, and we were able to strategically utilize unmanned aircraft that had the capability of dropping spheres that catch on fire and really control the way we implemented the burning of that. And so we were able to take 2 natural ignitions. One, I think, was at about 19 acres. The other one was sitting somewhere around 2 or 3. Bring that out to road systems that had been prepped and readied, and with a conjunction of burning all along the roads and using that unmanned aircraft, those drones, to fill in the blanks, we're able to really create a nice mosaic of desirable fire effects across about 3,100 acres of the forest. And it just lined up great because that was in a unit that was set to be burned at some point in the future anyway, but we were able to utilize these natural starts to pull that off. And I think overall we learned some lessons about the ramp up and ramp down of that, the way they fired it, having multiple hotshot crews with drone capability coming together to work in sets and really kind of figure out how to best utilize their tools. Was a great success overall. I think that people like Dustin giving us compliments about the way we were able to coordinate and collaborate, keep them in the know. Green Diamond made a visit to the fire. They had private lands north of there. By all accounts I've heard, they were happy with the way we were communicating, what we were trying to achieve on the landscape. It's always going to be right fire, right time, right place. But I think it's important that we've got incident commanders out there now that have the mindset of, well, wait, maybe we shouldn't just immediately put this out. Look at the time of year it is, look at the fire behavior. Maybe there's a chance for us to do some fire restoration on this landscape. And everything came together on the Dillon Creek fire. Oddly enough, we ended up with a new start yesterday that somehow managed to make it, I think, to 19 acres before it was reported. Just north, I think about 6 miles north of the Dillon Creek fire, the northernmost part of the Dillon Creek fire. It fell within the boundary of one of the boxes we thought of making for the Dillon Creek fire, so the road systems were already prepped. And final decision hasn't been made on what we're going to do with what the district is going to do with the Dillon Creek fire yet. The forecast calls for a lot of moisture, so I think there's a chance that fire might get suppressed by Mother Nature, and we may just go in and clean it up. Conditions might not be right to carry that one out. The box around that would be about 800 more acres, but we're looking at it, we're assessing it, but this one may be a put it out one. It may not be a let's take this one out to a road system, so we'll see how that goes. But I think the philosophy is right fire, right place, right time, and in collaboration with our partnership. And one last thing I will mention before questions, we've been discussing the declaration of fire season on our Monday morning calls for the last several weeks. I think it was kind of decided, given this week's forecast, flash flooding possible under some of these slow-moving storms is what was said to us yesterday. That will hold off another week, but most likely, probably 90% chance or better, we'll be going into declared fire season sometime late next week. Dustin, we pick a specific date for that? Thursday or Friday, right, is kind of what we talked about. So there will be a press release. We'll get all that information out to the public at large. We'll likely go into fire season. Generally, when we enter fire season, it's at a moderate, an IFPL of 1. We'll ease our way into the fire season this year, but middle of June, it kind of starting to feel like maybe it's time to start getting the public thinking about fire season, and that declaration would be that. So.
All right, we're kind of running a little bit long, but thank you, everybody. Commissioners, did you have any questions for Jeb or the group?
Just a real quick one. I was up on Boot Lake fire scar this last weekend, and Dustin brought up a pretty good point about how the regeneration is really happening up there. It also makes me kind of worried that later in the year that we could have the possibility of reburning in that country. What are your guys' thoughts on that?
I think that's always a possibility, right? But I think it depends on how you look at it. Is it a human start, unplanned event, or is it a natural start, unplanned event? And if so, this is a fire resilient ecosystem, it's a fire tolerant ecosystem. So is it possible that that fire is going to do more good than harm? Those kind of things. So on Forest Service land anyway, we look at all those right fire, right place, right time things, and maybe it's that fire needs to come in and do some of that thinning. You know, that's a natural part of the ponderosa pine forest is that 10 to 15 year fire return interval. And so I think that's a great question, Commissioner Albertson, but furthermore is how do we manage that large fire scar in the long run to not just end up with something that's going to burn every 5 years and nothing ever grows back. So it's a potential, yeah, that brush is going to start coming back, those small trees are going to sprout, we don't want to lose all of those, but we also have portions of the forest that are probably 1,500 to 2,000 trees per acre that should be 20 to 60 trees per acre. And so how do we manage that scar for the long run? And I think natural starts are a part of that. Human starts are always put it out, you know, use the best tactic and strategy to contain the fire as small as possible because it's a human caused start. Well, some of those lightning starts, I think we need to look at you know, how do we manage those to restore fire on that landscape, and then as we move into that 10-year window, how do we implement prescribed fire in that to get more of you know, a pre-Western settlement, pre-100 years of fire suppression environment, which is what I think we all really want on our forest landscapes, public lands again. Hopefully that's not too much of a talk around answer, but it's going to be, we'll take each one as it comes.
I had some questions, but you answered them really well in your presentation, so a fantastic presentation, it's really good information. I do want to apologize for laughing slightly during part of it.
I know,
I was not laughing at you, it was, I think the faces around the room a little bit, and just our response to the $25,000 signing bonus.
Right.
Was,
It makes me laugh too.
yeah, right.
I mean, how do you not?
Yeah,
How do you not?
it's interesting.
Two people.
With only 2 applicants with
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
Has the chief's letter come out yet?
It has not, and it's hindering other
A
things,
little
right?
unusual.
Yeah, so the one thing, so in that one of the packets I gave you was just kind of the group of some of the press releases for the Dillon Creek fire. Read those at your leisure, but that's a lot of that language lines up with last year's chief's letter of, you know, fire resilient landscapes, returning fire to the ecosystem, and so it's a great point. I'm curious to see what that portion of the letter is going to say this year. We're struggling a little bit internally because there's certain words we're supposed to use for these kind of fires like the Dillon Creek, and there's certain words we're not supposed to use. And the chief's letter last year specifically said fire for resource benefit. Well, we were told years ago not to say that out loud anymore. That's not, it was all, we weren't supposed to call it managed fires. It's all, we suppress every fire, we just use different tactics. And you know, but I would point out that the fire management plan for the Fremont Wainema National Forest specifically has language in it, clear back from whatever it was, 88 or 87 when it was written, about monitoring fires and fire on the landscape and all those things. So we, even all these years later, we're still in alignment with our forest plan. We're doing nothing outside of what, you know, has been approved by NEPA all these years and everything else. We're just trying to figure out a way to balance that with you know, the public perception of fire on the landscape, with private landowner concerns, with threats to communities, and so, you know, right fire, right place, right time.
One last thing I'd just say is wearing your BLM hat. Could be a busy fire
It
season.
very well could.
We care deeply about the seat base, and we look forward to the next steps in the
Awesome.
remodel there.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to that as well. Yeah. All right. Thank you, Commissioners.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Yeah, thank you guys, appreciate you. You want to take a quick 2-3 minute break?
Do you?
Well, I need those restrooms.
Okay, quick one thing break. Ready, break.
Yeah.
Kevin, we'll have you go next.
That sounds excellent. Dave and I were just, our ears perked up a little bit at the discussion around an $80,000 job for 8 days a month. We were just curious.
I want that job.
Where do we-
I want that job.
We were just curious about applications for that.
You know what I was thinking? I was thinking, this could be my last day at work.
We'd like to see the description of that job anyway. See what requirements are there.
And to see if it's a $25,000 sign-up bonus too.
Well, that one might have even more. 'Cause that's all structural stuff. So, only working 8 days a month, you can tolerate a lot more, I think. It's,
Well, I can only theorize at this point.
You can see what you're up against though. You can see what you're up against in the job market.
Yeah.
Is it a 24-hour day, or is it an 8-hour day, or a 12-hour day?
If it's only
24
I don't
hours.
care if it's 25 hours a day. I've done them before.
No, I wouldn't care either, but.
as on our commissioners meeting with the legislators this morning, one of the commissioners from one of the counties brought up, we need to start putting on the heat to the state of Oregon for giving these guys, people, it's Matt Scarfo in Union County, about this, we're still paying benefits for them not to work. And he said he had 600 unemployed people receiving benefits in Union County. It's like,
Man, oh man.
yeah, they don't need to work, so they don't. And it has an effect everywhere.
You're not doing a two thing, right?
Oh, it's major.
That was one of our billing ones.
Trickle down. Major trickle down thing.
I mean, you can't fill $80,000 jobs with 8 days a week work, or 8 days a month. I mean, that's crazy. That just shows you how bad it is.
Oh, it's terrible, yeah. Trying to get that fellow's number, it might go
What
on.
kind of work is it? I didn't hear about
The
it.
structural firefighters through the Oregon State Fire Marshal's office.
Okay, we'll come back into session.
Might have to go on that website.
Well, just wait.
Yeah, that's right, I kind of was wondering where she was. I think she needed to use the restroom, so.
Yeah, I would do that.
I think, I don't know if she's. if
You know, you
she's
guys
okay
should
with-
sit apart from each other during meeting.
There's a-
You guys are,
This is kind of like a planning meeting.
that's what I'm afraid, that's what I'm afraid of.
This is department head planning back here in the back row.
Too many wild ideas going on back there.
Okay, we'll come back into session now, and next up we'll have Kevin Hawk with Walk and Roll Packers.
Morning.
Yeah.
In front of you is a quote for a walk and roll. And in the summary there, I've included some other information about these. We've utilized a few of these for the last 3 years on the back of our graders. It helps with the cyclical maintenance cycles of our gravel, extending the life of those bladings. We get some compactability when there's moisture, and we get a little less when it's dry, but still a major benefit to the gravel road programs that have these. We have 2 used ones and 2 new ones. This last, or I guess what my intention is to be the last one that we would need for a while, will be for the grader in North Lake. That gets, that operator is, works on a temporary capacity, but helps us when we're doing other specialized work. So then all of our graders up there would have a roller. It's significant improvements.
So is it, is this one a new
This one's new. I've been on the list with Lycox Enterprises for used. We were able to buy 2 used. Those were the first ones that we purchased several years ago. 2020 maybe, or 2019. But no used ones. We were kind of waiting for that availability, but it hasn't come. So I did budget for this. I think in the budget discussions, I pointed out and itemized several of the things that our line item for equipment included, and this was one of those things. If you look at the quote, I actually, if you're looking at what I think you are, that's my handwriting there, $29,590. It's minus the freight. I have a different way there to manage the freight that'll save us some money to get it here. So it'd be $29,590 for that, and it is a single source. We've had excellent success with these units that we have, and there'd be no reason to change that. They're extremely durable and somewhat maintenance free. We haven't had a lot of maintenance with them for the miles that they actually
Well,
get.
even the old ones,
Yeah.
the used ones, which were significantly lower cost, a third of this price.
Yeah, and those used ones had a lot of miles on them, if you will, being drug. They came
Right.
from the back in oil fields in South
Mhm.
Dakota, so they got utilized a lot. You have any questions? Any other questions about that?
So this will be paid in fiscal year 24,
This'll,
July 1?
this will be paid for after July, yes, correct, yep. Yep, and I think somewhere on here, maybe it's not this document, maybe it's the other one. They sent me an order acknowledgement too, which I'm waiting on till you guys approve this procurement, but we'd be able to pick it up then the first week of July. Or the second week of July. I did fail though, Jake kind of reminded me of this. I should have attached a picture of what they are, but I think you guys have already seen, all of you guys have seen what they are. They just scoop up with the rippers on our grader, so.
So it says in the document, however, though, that you would like to move forward with an additional unit in fiscal year 23.
July 1 is fiscal year 23.
Okay, all right. Oh, yeah, okay, gotcha. Sorry, got it reversed in my head.
I should have put fiscal year 23, 24, I guess.
Yeah, no,
but
that's,
to me, it's just
yeah,
fiscal year
right.
23.
That's fine.
Any other questions?
No questions. It's good. It's good purchase.
Anything else to add?
I don't believe so at this time. I can give you a 30-second update on what we're doing.
Sure.
We're transferring chip rock, and last night we had a flood event, so we had to stop doing that and go back to putting shoulders on Bear Flat Lane. I have some pictures that are pretty impressive of water running across it. Probably water that nobody's seen there before for quite a long time. Quite a flash event, so.
Flat Lane. Silver Lake.
Heads off of 31 towards Klamath County.
Says Silver Lake Highway.
Oh, okay.
And
The I always called it the Klamath Marsh or.
yeah,
Yeah, right.
in it is on theirs, or do they call it Silver Lake Highway?
They use all three.
Yeah, that's
It's
why
ridiculous.
that's actually why we named it. That's been 8 years ago. We put several Bear Flat lanes because EMS got confused with people calling in saying Klamath Marsh or Silver Lake, and they didn't have a milepost or know why. That's the only road we have actual mileposts on, half mile and milepost. But anyway, quite a flood event there, so they're,
Flat flash flood?
yeah, we're fixing shoulders today and still trying to transfer some chips so that we can start chipping in 2 weeks.
So the weather report is gearing up for more flash floods around there?
It's right for that, yeah, so we'll.
Adel usually gets hit sometime.
So we did go over preemptively and cleaned all the inlets there at 20 Mile because it hadn't been done for a year or two, so we did, we made the preparations that we can for that, and I have enough constituents over there that utilize that road that'll call me if there's something wrong. Thanks for your time.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.
Okay, next, let's go to Heidi Martinez with the OHA agreements. you like to talk about the Fifth Amendment to the authority first?
Fifth Amendment, so this is the one adding veterans, coverage for veterans to our DUII program, which is not a problem. We don't turn anybody away who comes to us for services. Historically, we really don't get paid for veteran services. We don't have apparently the licensed staff that VA wants us to have. However, a couple weeks ago, I did meet with Jen Antle and a representative from VA out of White City. I believe his name was Brian Pinkerton, and we are talking about other ways where we can provide services to veterans where, you know, we would be able to be reimbursed for that. Like I said, at this point, we don't turn anybody away. If we have a veteran that needs services and they come in, we'll give them services even if we don't get paid for it. But it's also nice to be able to have that reimbursement if we can have those agreements. So this is for adding the veterans, giving a little bit of money to do that for DUII, which is a great start.
Okay. See, it's for 3,000?
Yes.
Correct?
Mhm.
Okay. Any questions for Heidi on that one?
No questions.
All right. And then the next one?
So this is for the Mobile Response and Stabilization Services, or the MRSS, which is basically crisis services for children, young adults, and their families. We provide this service, we always have, but we are implementing some new pieces to it. One of the things we're doing is providing this publication to all family members or parents who end up bringing their children to the emergency room for a mental health crisis, because a lot of times they're not really sure how to navigate or what to do. So we did get this information. It was sent to us through Gobi, and so we make sure that we provide the parents and the older kids, the teenagers, young adults with this information, just so they have a little bit better understanding of what we can do to help stabilization after a crisis. So, and we generally work with the youth and the families to stabilize the immediate crisis, do a safety plan, talk about lethal means counseling, which is making sure we don't have guns or medications or anything in the house that could be dangerous, and then also encouraging them to enroll in our services. And with the kids, that usually includes what's called wraparound services, where we can support the entire family, not just focusing on an individual.
So in the past, we've had the mobile crisis unit many times before. Is this going to be kind of a full-time, part-time position, or is this just going to be a service that, how are you structuring the mobile crisis?
Well, right now, as we've been doing, we are rotating our
Okay.
current staff. So we do have 24/7, 365 coverage to all of Lake County.
Right.
You know, the state is talking about doing more funding for mobile crisis. They are asking for us to have more staff available for that. The problem here in Lake County is that we don't have an enormous amount of crises. Like, you know, when I worked in the Denver, Colorado area, one night I was on call, I got called to 4 different hospitals in one night. Didn't get a wink of sleep, you know, was just on the go all night. That, I don't think has ever happened here. The most crises I think we've ever had over a night here has been 2, kind of like a back-to-back, which is pretty rare. And I can't even say that we have a crisis every night or every day of the week. I was looking back at some of our data, and I think it was a year ago, January, so that would have been January 2022, I believe we had 10 crises for the entire month of January, and then a few months later we had 2 crises. You know, sometimes, and so it fluctuates quite a bit. You know, we are hoping that with our burn capabilities and having a drop-in center and doing things like that, that we can create a little bit more stabilization among the people in our community, and that hopefully they end up not going into crisis through the night because they've had support and things through the day where they can just come and drop in, you know, which is different than waiting for an appointment. And so I think that has been helping quite a bit, but I know that we also still need to have availability to respond in the event of a crisis. So we do, and even if the state comes out with more funding for mobile crisis, of course, the problem in our area is finding the staff
Right.
to fill those positions. I mean, they could give me $1 million to hire tomorrow, but that doesn't mean I can hire anybody because I just can't find anyone. So right now we have one person who serves as the on-call. They always have a backup, a QMHP backup. And what the state would really like us to have is a QMHA, QMHP team with the possibility of either a peer support or a CRM available as well. At this time, we don't have the staff, nor do we have the funds yet to be able to pay 3 to 4 people to be on call each night. And the more we double up like that, the more nights a week that everybody would have to be covering. Whereas right now, usually people can take 1 or 2 days a week and 1 weekend a month. And if we had to have multiple people on call at the same time, those same people would be having to do 3 and 4 probably nights a week. Which makes it hard after we've already worked, we're working our 40-hour weeks. Some mobile crisis teams do nothing but the mobile crisis. So it's not as difficult, they could be on call for, a week at a time. But we don't have that structure here. So we're doing the best with what we have. And I have hired a couple more individuals, so they will start working their way into the mobile crisis rotation as well.
Okay.
So.
That's good. Anything else to add?
Not unless you have any questions for me.
I know you have a vacancy on the crisis board. The crisis center, the crisis center. And I've heard that there's a few different folks interested, so looking forward to getting that whole.
Yeah, our next board meeting is the 22nd.
Gotcha.
And so hopefully we'll have more information. I did hear from Ella that she does have an applicant, so
Great.
I guess I'll get more of that information on the 22nd as well.
Sounds good.
So.
All right.
Okay, all right, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, next up we'll have Ann Crumrine with budget resolutions.
Hello.
Hello, Ann.
So for fiscal year that we're finishing up, June 30th, our 22-23 fiscal year, I think there's 4 resolutions in your packet. Trying to get people enough appropriation authority through June 30th. So the first one is 2022-08. This is in the matter of appropriation transfers for general fund. In the second page, I do a summary to list the department and the category that is being affected. So the first department that needed additional authority was Emergency Services, Department 107. This was new this year for us, moving Daniel Tagg to that department on his own. There was some unbudgeted office furniture purchased, and then he had additional travel and training that wasn't in that budget. The nice thing is we have savings from the GIS department because of how we changed that. So what this resolution will do is just transfer Materials and Services Authority from the GIS department to the Emergency Services Department.
Where were these costs coming from before? Like for that specifically, was that just in the sheriff's budget?
Yeah, Daniel Tagg used to be solely in the sheriff's budget,
Okay.
so.
Okay, no, that's helpful.
Department 111, the Juvenile Services. This actually was I created this scenario. When I was trying to balance our budget and appropriation authority after the contract settlement, I thought there was gonna be more savings in the juvenile department than there actually was. So I calculated that incorrectly. I took them too low. But with their staff changes and how they handled, what they were doing there, we need to increase back up about $6,000 in their personnel, but they will have savings in Materials and Services. So thank you, Jake. Thank you.
I wasn't aware, but Ann and I have worked together on this, so it's all good. I'm not throwing rocks and making fun of her yet.
I know, am I getting
Yeah.
drilled
Yeah,
back there?
you feel your ears burning
Yeah, no,
back
you
there
did
yet?
Duck and cover.
No, it's all good. It's all good, because we worked together on that before, and I didn't catch it either, so, although Ann wants to fall on the sword, I'll take out.
Okay, the jail department, they need additional authority, you know, a lot of things going on at the jail personnel. It looks to me like some of this is the step increases. So the nice thing with the jail though is they have additional revenue to the new release monitoring program. That actually, you can see, you know, they budgeted 15,000, year to date, they've brought in about 24.5, they still bring in more money this month even. So,
Just from the release monitoring.
yes,
Wow.
GPS,
How's
all
that?
monitoring stuff.
Yeah.
Who's funding that money?
the person that's getting released.
Oh,
So
they
they pay to be out of jail. Fantastic program. They're going to pay and then be monitored. So.
They still have
with-
to get an approval from the judge, they don't just.
Sounds like it's not cheap.
No, it's not, and that's part of that's the benefit to the sheriff's office having that, is the court orders them to pay for it. When we put someone on it in probation, we tell them they have to pay. We may get some money, we may not, but we still have to pay for the service. So their collection rate is phenomenal.
Yes.
Okay, so out of that 24,000, what are the costs of those the ankle bracelets and different things like that? What's the cost of some of those
It
things?
varies. Alcohol monitoring could be $7 a day, whereas just the GPS bracelet itself could be $6 a day. It just depends. But some of these folks are on there long-term. I mean,
Right,
they're released from jail to the monitoring till they go back to court, and that could be 2 weeks, it could be 4 weeks, and it keeps going until the judge orders it or allows it to be removed.
are any of these revenues covering those costs? Okay.
Oh, yeah, that's what that's what.
All right, so that $15,000 line item, actually, there's costs coming out of that too. This isn't just flat out revenue. I mean, it is, but there's costs associated.
I would have to
Yeah,
defer
so
that.
if you look in the detail underneath all of this, in the jail department, you'll see prisoner fees. But then in materials and services, you see electronic monitoring costs. So when this was printed, there was $11,000 in prisoner fees, which is the paying for monitoring, and then electronic monitoring expense was $9,700. So they brought in more revenue than they planned on, they spent more dollars than they planned on because of this program.
Gotcha.
But in terms of just trying to get more appropriation authority, I can keep, you know, that revenue, they have additional revenue that was unbudgeted, and then they have additional personnel costs, but they will have some savings in materials and services overall.
Gotcha.
Even though that line item's over, you can see there's savings in prisoners, care of, medical care of prisoners, inmate telephone, just different places throughout that.